So, micro habits, everyday mobility. Like I said, my name is Carrie McGinn. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, 500-hour yoga teacher, and I am a huge fan of everyday mobility and micro habits. So, I'm so happy to be here with you today sharing this information because I think it's a little important. And all of my clients and friends and family members I would guess would say that one of my catchphrases is probably "a little bit goes a long way" and or "something is better than nothing." So, that will tell you a little bit about me, and you'll probably hear me say those things again throughout our time today. So, a little bit about what to expect. We're going to talk about how to start a habit, how to set goals, like what are and why do we do micro habits, and then we're going to assess kind of your day a little bit and talk a little bit about the power of everyday movement and give you some real good examples of ways to get moving throughout your day. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm excited to dive in. So, first and foremost, when we talk about adding habits into your daily life, we have to think about what's realistic and we also have to think about what works for us. So, and one thing I will also like to add here before we even get started is I'm going to offer you a lot of suggestions today, a lot of different suggestions, and some things may land. You might be like, that sounds amazing. I can totally do that. And some things might not feel possible. That is because a lot of us learn differently. We are maybe night owls versus morning people. Our home lives are different. Do we have family? Do we have kids? Do we have dogs? Are we taking care of elderly parents? Our activities, our habits are different. And even like how we work at our desk is different. So I want you to take everything with a grain of salt and take into account like how you learn and what your needs are on a day-to-day basis when I give some of these recommendations. And if something just isn't resonating, put it off to the side and maybe pick something else out. So, when it comes to building habits, this is why micro habits are super helpful, is you want to start easy, so easy that you can't say no. Make it so simple, so small that it feels silly to say no. Some of habit building, I don't want to say it's tricking yourself, but it's like working with your brain and your body so that it becomes consistent. So start small and remember that a little bit goes a long way. You might want to keep a tally of how many times I say that because it's going to be a couple. And then you want to start to, you can always increase your habits in small ways. So, for example, like 1% effort over time consistently adds up. And it is easier to exponentially grow when you're doing just a little bit more each day than when you try to go from 0 and 60. And then as you're building a habit, say it's meditating, your goal is to meditate for 20 minutes a day, you can build up and break habits into chunks to make it more accessible for your lifestyle. And then keeping in mind that life happens, we get, busy. There are seasons in our life. Like I think about summertime a lot, and I don't know about you all, but I live in an area where there's so much to do in the summertime and it's a very touristy area. And I have a lot more to do in the summertime. So my habits are slightly different than in the wintertime when I have a little bit more time and space for my personal daily habits. So remembering that life happens and vacation happens and work deadlines happen and don't let that derail you. If you miss a day, you get back into it. And then be patient and don't rush. Habits take a while to form, and if you stick with it, it's more easily to sustain. But that's why we start small. So when it talks about habits, even when we talk about micro habits, it can be helpful to set goals. And you've probably heard of SMART goals before, but just a brief kind of review. SMART goals are specific: who, what, where, when, why, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So a really great one for say mobility is I want to remember to do 2 minutes of lower body mobility work every day for the next week. That is specific. You're doing lower body mobility work. It's measurable. I'm doing 2 minutes a day. It's achievable because you're not saying I'm going to do 2 hours a day. And it's relevant maybe to your goals of feeling better in your body. And it's time bound. Let's try it for a week and we'll go from there. There are a million different goals that you can set in terms of mobility. So pick what makes the most sense for you. And I'd love to hear from you. when it comes to mobility, is there a certain body part or part of your body that you'd love to work on? Say, let's set these goals together. If you had to pick one part of your body that feels like it needs a little bit more movement over the next month, what is it? Feel free to pop it in the chat and maybe we'll inspire each other as well. So, micro habits. What's a micro habit versus a habit? A micro habit is small intentional actions that compound over time. And once again, a little bit goes a long way. So, what this looks like is maybe you just stand to reach your arms up to the sky after every email you send. Maybe it's at the end of every Zoom call, you take a 2-minute walk break. For me, I work from home. I'm going to walk up the stairs to the bathroom and back down instead of going to the bathroom right outside my office door. That could be every time you are done with a project, you stand up out of your chair and sit back down 5 times. You're not moving for an hour, you're not even moving for 5 minutes, like a minute, 30 seconds goes a long way here. So we'll talk like how do you stack these things into your day, but it's small and intentional is what it comes down to. A quote, small hinges swing big doors. So we're thinking small, sustainable habits here. Why does this work? I'm a big fan that we need to know why so that we can do it. So I'm going to share a little bit about the science around micro habits and the science around movement with you all today as well. So the neuroscience of habit formation is that there's a cue. It can be internal or external, and your brain recognizes it. And then there's an action, a routine or behavior, and then there's a reward. So let's head back to that cue for a moment because cues can be different. Cue could be like, oh, my back doesn't feel good if I sit for too long. That's an internal cue. Or like, oh man, I've been sitting all day. I feel stiff. Internal cue. But there's also external cues. Like I mentioned earlier, every time I'm done with a Zoom call, or every time I'm done with emails, or at the top of every hour. It could even be like, take your phone and set an alarm type of thing. And then the action is when you get that cue, what do? That's our mobility, that's our stretching, that's our movement. And when it comes to action, repetition is going to strengthen that connection between the cue and the action and make it easier to keep doing it. So if you, every time you finish an email, you stand up and stretch, it's going to become second nature. And then the reward is kind of twofold. When you do something and it feels good, your brain releases dopamine to reinforce that learning, and you remember that it feels good. Now, here's the challenging thing that I see a lot with a lot of people. If you're new to mobility and you're new to stretching, it might feel intense at first, and you might not feel like the immediate reward, that immediate dopamine hit of like, oh, that feels so good, especially if you're dealing with a lot of stiffness in your body. Now, that's where you might need to have a different reward for yourself. Like, I have one client that, like, she likes, it's silly, but she gives herself like a check mark on her daily habits checklist every time she does her micro habit. Or she buys herself a coffee. There's small ways to give rewards. Ultimately, we want the reward to be internal, but to bolster that habit, we can create external rewards as well. And then micro habits really do work because consistency is more important than intensity with a lot of this stuff, especially when we talk about the science of stretching and science of mobility. It's less about how long you stretch or mobilize your body for and more about how often you do it. And because the body does adapt to what it repeats. And I'll share a little bit about the science of like the nervous system in a few slides, but we'll come back to that. But essentially, every time you complete this loop of cue, action, reward, the neural connection in your brain strengthens and the habit becomes more ingrained. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes to do. So let's think for like 30 seconds, not too long. What are some of those like cues that you, or those habits that you do maybe consciously or subconsciously? Now, you might be like, oh, there's some good habits. Are there any habits that you want to hold on to in this next month? Feel free to pop it in the chat or write it down or just think about it. And then are there any habits that you're like, "Ooh, I didn't realize that that habit was growing. Maybe I want to break that habit in place of a new one, a more mobility-based one." So just kind of thinking, assessing awareness is key here. So we talked about habits and what's going on. But now let's kind of flip the switch of like the what is actually important in terms of everyday movement. So our modern lifestyle has shifted a great amount over the past 100 years even. And there's a lot of screen time and there's a lot of sitting in our modern lifestyle. And that can cause adaptations in our physical body over time that can cause stiffness and stagnation and tightness and even lead to pain and injury down the line. So, the power of everyday movement is that small movement counters a lot of stagnation. When we are sitting for 8 hours a day, when we are doing something for extended period of time, that takes a toll on our body. Even if like sitting is not inherently bad, I want to say that. But doing anything for 8 hours is going to take a toll on our body. There's going to be stagnation. Even if you walked all day for 8 hours, if anyone's been on their feet for a full 8 hour day, you're going to feel that too. And it's really like what your body is used to and not used to. So your body adapts over time to the input it receives. So small movement will counter that stagnation because movement improves circulation and lymphatic drainage. It prevents stuck, so it prevents the fascia and the muscle from getting stuck and tight in these prolonged postures. And it helps recharge our energy actually by giving our brain new sensory input. So it does so much more than just our physical body, it helps with our mental body as well. And I think when people think about mobility and stretching and overall like exercise even, we often assume that like, well, if I don't have an hour, it's not worth it. But you don't need an hour. You need awareness. And it's because it's not about doing more, it's about the intention behind what you're doing and what you're doing often. So when I work with clients, I always say to them, like, I'd rather you do 10 minutes of movement every day than 2 hours of movement once a week. Your body listens to what you do most often, not occasionally. I'm not saying if you have an hour and a half to work out every now and then, don't do that. It's more that if you want to make change over time, you need to be consistent and smaller chunks can be easier to manage. So when it comes to that, like I have 5 pillars of everyday movement to share with you here, or everyday self care, really. So, first and foremost, we can pay attention to our posture and our alignment just even when we're in sitting. Mobility begins with awareness of where our body's at. So, I invite you to kind of check in here. Like maybe you close your eyes or just find a soft gaze, but check in and notice like what does your posture look like? And are there any parts in your body that are holding on to tension here today? And that's a great place to start, kind of build awareness of like where you are and what your body may need in the future. Good postures can help decrease strain, improve our breath, and supports nervous system regulation. So, a couple things like micro movements in terms of posture that you can do is just seated at your desk. Can you roll your shoulders up to your ears and back down your back and do maybe 5 shoulder rolls to open up the chest and let the shoulders engage down your back body before either each Zoom call? It will take you 10 seconds. Maybe if you're standing, say you're brushing your teeth, can you really press into your feet firmly and feel that connection of your feet into the ground? Really think about tall, lengthened spine. Bringing awareness and making these small adjustments are already little movements you can do throughout your day. Another huge thing is joint movement. I want everyone to think, when was the last time, and this might be depending on if you have kids or if you what type of movement you do, when was the last time you sat all the way down on the floor and stood all the way up and reached your arms all the way overhead? Think about that. How well can you move every joint in your body? So a joint is shoulders, elbows, wrists, hips, knees, ankles. Those are all different joints in the body. There are others, but those are the big joints in the body. How well can you move all these joints and how well can you control this movement? Our joints need freedom and support. And due to the constraints of our modern lifestyle, the average person does not take their joints through their full range of motion every day. And in order to prevent injury, our joints need to be able to move with freedom and support. And moving your joints, it can be as simple as just like circling the arms, circling the wrists. It keeps tissues hydrated and fascia supple and helps reduce pain and stiffness. So roll out the wrists, roll out the ankles, bend and extend the knees, shrug the shoulders up and down, lean forward and lean back up. Just moving each joint through its range of motion is really powerful way to incorporate this micro movement. And then we've got circulation and breath. So breath is the connection between the body and mind, and every inhale and exhale actually moves your circulatory system and your lymphatic system, which helps support heart health, immune function, and mental clarity. And it also helps improve mobility through your whole body. If we can't take a deep breath, it actually decreases our ability to move through our rib cage, to move through some of the bones of our spine, things like that. So this could look like 3 deep breaths, breathing into your diaphragm and your belly, and then exhaling to let it go before you open your inbox. It's also really good if you're feeling stressed while looking at your inbox. This could be just a gentle twist to one side with a breath, and then other side with a breath. Most people breathe too quickly and they don't use the full expansion of their full breath, which can limit our range of motion. And then a huge piece of everyday movement is mind body awareness. So, awareness is key. Can you notice what's going on in your body before it becomes painful? And the more you move your body through its full range of motion, the more you can notice when something feels off before it's something that sidelines you completely. So maybe at the top of every hour, you pause and scan your body. What do I need right now? This helps build what's called interoception, the ability to feel what's going on in your body. It also helps with emotional regulation and reduces your injury risk. So these are just a couple of ways that like we can incorporate this every day and to recognize that these are important parts of living in our body every day. So, some simple micro habits to try. Maybe in the morning, you start with a cat cow stretch, even in standing. So, you arch the back and look up as you inhale, and then you tuck the chin and round the spine as you exhale. Maybe you just do 5 as you sit on the edge of your bed. Maybe while your coffee's brewing, you reach your right arm up and over for a side bend. And then you reach your left arm up and over for a side bend. Excuse me. Those are 2 just micro movements right there. Maybe you find a little 3-minute desk mobility flow that you can do on your lunch break every day. Or maybe that even just looks like getting up and walking up and down the stairs. Maybe in the evening, you do some of that diaphragmatic breathing. So inhale, expand into the rib cage and low belly. And exhale, soften. And then you do a few shoulder rolls and a neck stretch, dropping your left ear to your left shoulder. And then coming through center and dropping your right ear to your right shoulder. And then, of course, you can add more in. I love to think about movement snacks. Like, what are 5 minutes of movement that I can do every hour? And once again, it depends a lot on like what your schedule looks like. Do you have meetings? Do you have projects? Things like that. So, another thing to just check in with in terms of that building that mind body awareness is check in. How do I feel physically? How do I feel emotionally? How do I feel mentally? If you feel exhausted and scattered, you might not want to go, you might not, you know, want something high energy, but you might want something that grounds you, feet flat, deep breathing, gentle stretching. If you're feeling a little sleepy, maybe you want to get up and like dance a little bit, or maybe you want to go for a walk in the fresh air to kind of pick up the spirits. There's all sorts of things you can do, but you can make a better decision on what feels right when you check in with yourself. So let's talk a little bit about the science behind movement and habits here so that we can create more habits and move better. So when it comes to everyday movement in particular, it's consistency reprograms the nervous system, not willpower. So we can use consistency to create safety in our nervous system, and this can support our overall body. Micro movements, small movements can also keep your entire nervous system adaptable rather than reactive. So that means you're better able to handle stress and you feel more resilient. And just when we move, our fascia stays more hydrated and elastic, and it keeps our brain fresher as well. A really great way to achieve this is habit stacking. So, linking movement with an activity. Like I said, brew your coffee, do a side stretch. Let your dog out to go to the bathroom and bend over to touch your toes. When you link your activity with something you're already doing, it helps support that activity. And then remembering that the research really does show that 1% daily improvements equals long-term transformation. So 1% improvement each day creates exponential growth over time, both physically and neurologically, than trying to change overhaul your whole life in 12 hours type of thing. So that is more sustainable over time. So, like I said, pairing your habits with existing routines. Another thing that can really help build sustainable routines is tracking and celebrating small wins. So, I did 5 minutes of movement on my lunch break every day. Like maybe I buy myself a new tank top to work out in. I don't know. There's all different ways you can reward yourself, and it depends on what motivates you. Embrace progress, not perfection. So, once again, if you skip a day, it is not the end of the world. You get right back after it. It can also be helpful to like really track tangible changes. So for me, like a big goal, this is a really intense goal. I'm not putting this goal on anyone else, but I'm a yoga teacher and a yogi, and I want to be able to do a front split just because. So I feel what it feels like in my body, but I don't know what it looks like if I'm making any improvements. So I take a picture of myself or a video in that front split. For someone that might be like, okay, I want to be able to touch my toes by the end of 3 months. So can you track that progress via a picture? And remembering again, was this time 5? A little bit goes a long way. I will share a personal story that when we first the pandemic first started, my whole business switched to virtually, which meant I was teaching yoga classes and seeing clients virtually, which also meant I was demonstrating on my yoga mat multiple times a day, every day. I didn't realize it until a month or two went by, but I made more mobility wins during that time than I've had in my whole life because I was teaching people how to stretch their hamstring every single day, multiple times a day. So in turn, I had more mobility because I was doing it every day. And I was like, it was a really just surprising thing because I was like, oh, when I do something 5 times a day, I improve. And then set goals that are fun. Like I said, my middle split goal, it's not going to gain me anything besides just to see if I can do it. It's for fun. So we're going to save some time for a mini practice at the end. And I just want to continue on so I can save time for questions as well. So how do you create this time throughout the day? Things like reminders, that could be an alarm on your phone. I use Post-it notes on my computer screen. That could be environmental cues, like we said, at the end of a Zoom meeting, after emails, on your lunch break. It could be community. Maybe at lunch, your whole office does something together. How can you make it easy to remember and easy to do, is what it comes down to. And then some common roadblocks are I don't have time. So that's when we talk about habit stacking. Stack it. You're drinking your coffee, stretch your hamstrings. I forget is another common one. So visual cues like Post-it notes and alarms can be helpful. I also say if it's something that say you need like props for, I tell my clients, say you're like, I want to stretch for 10 minutes every morning when I get up. Can you lay out a yoga mat and any props you might need somewhere in your house that you would like almost trip over in order to remember to do it? And then I lose motivation is another really common one. Accountability, so having a buddy that you can do it with, and pleasure helps here. And what I mean by pleasure is don't set a goal that makes you go, oh my gosh, that sounds like the worst. Try to start with habits that intrigue you at the very least and sound exciting. I personally actually stopped running for quite some time because I was doing some pain in my body. And then when I dealt with that pain, I got to this point where I was like, oh, I don't know, I just don't feel like running. And that happened for like a year or two. And then this summer, I don't know what came over me, but eventually running sounded exciting again. So I didn't force myself to run until I was like, that sounds exciting again. I was doing other movement, but I just didn't force myself to do the thing that felt like miserable. So, remembering that movement can be medicine, movement and mobility helps improve our mood, our focus, and our energy. And I hate to say it, but those age old adages of motion is lotion, and if you don't use it, you lose it, are really important. My clients, as they age, what I find most often is if they stop getting down on the floor for whatever reason, usually fear or lack of mobility, they very quickly lose the ability and the confidence to get down on the floor. And one of the most important things I think that someone can do as they age, and this starts when you're like in your 20s, is to get down on the floor without holding on to anything and get back up at least once a day. Now, this is easier if you have kids or if you do yoga or Pilates or something floor based, but you'd be surprised how many people don't get down on the floor and back up every day. And if you do only one thing that you learn from this lecture, I invite it to be that. So remember, small actions create a big ripple effect. Movement is self care, and you don't need to do more, you need to move smarter. Now, I'm going to come off the screen share really quickly here, and I'm going to share we're going to do 2 stretches, and feel free while we're doing these to pop any chat questions in the chat if you have them. So very simple stuff here. You're going to sit up nice and tall, place your feet on the floor, reach your arms up, and then twist to the left. So take your right hand to the left armchair. Oops, sorry, let me tip it down. Or your left hand and your left hand behind you. Good. Come back through center, reach both arms up, and then twist to the right. Left hand, right arm behind. Good. And then come on up. Big arm circle back. And that's a really great place to start. Awesome. So we have like 2 minutes here. Feel free to ask any questions, comments, anything at all. I'm happy to chat. I'm going to just read the chat really quickly. All right, we got some people wanting to move their neck and shoulders. Looking over, starting just with range of motion, looking to side, up and down, side bend, side bend. Think about all the ways your neck or shoulders can move and go through there. Standing desks, yes, standing desks are great. I would recommend for standing desks, don't forget, like, stand up for an hour, sit down for an hour. That change of position is helpful. Yoga has helped me with all this stuff. Yeah, me too. I'm biased. I'm a yoga teacher. And my mom would get down on the floor well into her 70s. Yes. Yeah. Getting down, like I said, if you do only one thing after today, get down on the floor and get back up. It actually, not to like go too deep into the research, but this is going to sound a little morbid. Your mortality rate is higher if you are not able to get down on the floor and back up. And part of that is a lot of times as people age, if they fall and get injured and can't get back up, they can't get to their phones or get care they need. That's a huge piece of it. But being able to get down on the floor and back up on your own is really empowering as you age in particular. Yeah. I frequently teach classes where I call it like get up off that thing, aka the thing is the floor. How can we get up and down off the floor in all different shapes? Awesome. Yeah, thanks for being here. If you have any other questions, we got just a little bit more time. Feel free to pop them in the chat. If not, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure. And I hope you get moving today. Hope it inspires you in some way.